everyone, it's Alice, and today we are going to take a look at some book releases that are coming out this year that I'm really excited about. Now, I'm not always in the loop when it comes to new book releases. Like, I don't pay that much attention to it necessarily. I very rarely pre-order books and stuff, but I've noticed that a lot of the books that I've been adding to my to-be-read list lately are books coming out this year. So I don't know what's happening, but they're just more on my radar than usual, and I thought we could just talk about it a little bit. I am sort of trying to focus on my existing TBR, but you know how it is with like new and shiny things. Anyways, we're just gonna start with some books coming out in January and work our way from there. I do think maybe some of these books in the beginning here might be out by the time this video comes out, but whatever. We're just gonna talk about them anyway, and I'm going to try and get through these fairly quickly because I do have a lot of books on this list. First up, we have a sequel that I'm super excited about, and I'm sure several of you are also excited. It's Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett, which is the sequel to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I read last year, and it was one of my favorite books of the year. I loved that book, and I can't wait to see more of this world. The first book follows the main character, Emily Wilde, as she is working on this encyclopedia of fairy lore, and she goes on a research trip, and the book is basically filled with like magic, adventure, and a little bit of romance, and I'm really excited to see where the story goes next. I'm especially excited to see our characters again, and like the dynamic between the two main characters I just love. And for me, this is like, it's cozy, but it's also a tad dark, like the first book was at least, and I really like that combination. The second one that caught my eye, not gonna lie, may have noticed it at first because of the cover, but then I looked into it and it sounds really good. It's Voyage of the Damned by Frances White, and this is like a fantasy mystery novel, and it's basically a murder mystery on a ship filled with magical passengers, which sounds right up my alley. It says that it's kind of like if Agatha Christie wrote fantasy, which is like, that's a lot to live up to, but it could also be amazing. And I love these kinds of like locked room classic type of mysteries with like a little bit of an extra magical twist. Like, it sounds really good. Then we have a new book coming out from Alex Michaelides. It's called The Fury, and it's about this reclusive ex-movie star and this movie star's friends who go on this spontaneous trip to Greece, and all is well and fine until, of course, a murder happens. There's something about this author that I really get on with. Even though I don't always end up loving the books, there's always something in them that just pulls me in. And I'm really intrigued by this because the setting sounds really interesting, and it might be like a friend group. Maybe someone in the friend group is a murderer. Like, it seems to have that kind of thing going on. And it sounds kind of like a great summary type read. Another one with a cool setting, this one is set in Italy I think, is The House of Last Resort by Christopher Golden, and this is set in this abandoned town where I think the mayor of the town decides to sell off homes for really cheap, and the only thing you have to really promise is that you're gonna live in the town for 5 years or something. And we follow this American couple who decide to do this. It sounds pretty great, maybe too good to be true, but it does sound initially pretty great. And so they move to this town, and then of course there's something weird about the house, about the town, about all of it, and it sounds kind of creepy. Next, we have The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels by Janice Hallett. And the reason I noticed this is because I read The Appeal by this author and I really liked it. I do think she has some other books out, like that she came out with previously, and I've looked into them and they don't sound that intriguing, but this one sounds really good, so I think I want to give this a go. It's about this crime journalist who looks into this cult, and it just says that she finds herself a little bit too close to the story, and anything to do with a cult is always intriguing, and I think this author's writing style in combination with that could be really good. Moving on to February, we have a bunch of books here, starting with These Deadly Prophecies by Andrea Tang. And this is actually YA fantasy, but the reason that I want to read it, and the reason I'm intrigued by it, is that it says it's for fans of Knives Out, which I just feel like could be really good. It's about this apprentice to a sorcerer who has to solve her boss's murder to prove her own innocence, I think, which I think could be really good. We then have The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Katherine Arden, and I am so excited to see this author come out with something else. I love the Winter Nights trilogy by her, and I just am obsessed with that series, so whatever she comes out with, I will read. This is historical fiction fantasy, which is a genre I really like, and I think it's set during the First World War, and we follow this combat nurse who, I think her brother is dead, but then she gets these like eerie signs that maybe he's not. I don't really know what that means, but it sounds very intriguing, and I'm sure this author is gonna take that story and make it amazing. Another fantasy book we have coming out is The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown, which I think follows this bookseller who gets a gift. She gets a book from one of her favorite customers, and this book gives her the magical ability to travel anywhere she wants. But then, of course, someone else wants this book and they start chasing after her or something. But I just like the idea of a book allowing you to travel anywhere, because that's kind of what books do, but like putting that in a fantasy setting, I think it sounds really cool. Then we have another one where, I'm not gonna lie, I noticed this cover right away and I am obsessed with it. I love it. It's A Tempest of Tea by Hafsah Faizal, and this is like fantasy, historical fiction, YA, and it follows an orphan girl and her crew, and they go on this heist and they end up working with some vampires, I think, which just sounds like a lot of fun and a tad dark, which is kind of why I want to read it. I also just think this cover is amazing. It's beautiful. Some of these YA covers are just, they just get to me. Next, we have a book I'm intrigued by because I love books about witches. It's called Island Witch by Amanda Jayatissa, and this is inspired by Sri Lankan folklore, I'm pretty sure, which is really cool. And it's set in the late 19th century. It's like a gothic historical fiction type novel, and maybe it has some fantasy elements. And we follow this woman who ends up having to find out what is going on in her coastal village because there are all of these mysterious attacks. And I'm assuming maybe she's a witch? I don't really know, but it sounds really good. We then have The American Daughters by Maurice Ruffin, and this is historical fiction, and it's about this young woman who joins this sisterhood of black women who work to undermine the Confederates. And I think it's set in New Orleans, which is a really cool setting. And I just really like historical fiction novels like this, and I really like the cover, so it just looks intriguing to me because of that. I then have two books for March. The first one is The Best Way to Bury Your Husband by Alexia Casale, and this is an excellent title, and it's like a dark comedic mystery novel about four women who come together. Either they've all like murdered their husband or one of them has, and it sets off a chain of events. I don't really know, but it sounds like a really fun title and like just slightly dark, which I think sounds like a lot of fun. Secondly, we have How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin, and this again says it's for fans of Knives Out, but it also says it's for fans of the Thursday Murder Club, so obviously this sounds right up my alley. It's set in the 1960s, I think, so it's historical fiction mystery, and it's about this woman who spends her whole life trying to avoid this fortune coming true that she was told when she was young, but then she's murdered, so it does come true, I think, and her niece has to solve the case. Then we have April, where we're starting with Nosy Neighbours by Freya Sampson, and this is like a mystery slash romance book, and the reason I'm intrigued by it is that I'm pretty sure this is about this unlikely friendship between a 25-year-old woman and this, like, I think woman in her 70s who live in the same building, and they kind of hate each other, but then they come together because something happens in the building that they're trying to figure out, which I'm assuming is like the mystery part of the story. Where the romance comes in, I have no idea, but it just sounds like an interesting thing, and I love stories about like friendship between different generations. I just think that's a great thing to read about. Next, we have a book I'm super excited about. It's Empire of Shadows by Jacquelyn Benson, and this is like a historical fiction adventure type book, and this author wrote the book The Smoke Hunter, which I absolutely loved, It's a little bit of a ridiculous book, but I just had so much fun with it. And I am a little confused by this because this doesn't appear to be a sequel to that book, but it appears like it has the same characters. So the main characters that we followed in The Smoke Hunter seem to be the main characters in this book, but this is like a new series. I don't really know, but I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to read it because I already know the character. It's set in Victorian times though, and we follow this main character who is an aspiring archaeologist, and of course she finds this map to an ancient city and off she goes to find it, and there's a villain chasing after her, because of course there is. I just love these types of books. I love these types of adventure stories, and I can never find enough of them. So whenever I find one that sort of ticks the boxes for me, I get super excited. And I already know that this author can write the kind of adventure that I'm looking for, so I think this is gonna be fantastic. Then we have a new book coming out from Leigh Bardugo. It's The Familiar, and I'm really excited about this because I really like Bardugo. I especially like her adult books, and this is also a book for adults. I think it's historical fiction with a little bit of fantasy to it. It follows this girl who seems to have some sort of magical abilities, and the family that she works for finds out that she can do this magic, and they use it to, I don't know, like get their social standing up or like impress some people or something. They basically use her, and it's set in the Spanish Golden Age, I think. And it all just sounds interesting. I really like Bardugo's writing style and her storytelling style, so I would read whatever she comes out with, but this does sound very good. Very interesting. Excitingly enough, we have even more adventure on the horizon. This next one is called Salt Blood by Francesca de Torres, and this one is like historical fiction with a little bit of fantasy to it, and I think it starts off in 1685, and we follow a girl who grows up to become a pirate, which I am all for. One of my favorite books that I read last year was also a pirate book, and I just feel like there's a lot of potential for me in like that subgenre, and I really want to read more pirate books, so I'm excited about this. I also love this cover. Like, if this doesn't scream adventure, I don't know what does. In May, we have another witch book coming out. It's The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields, and although this is a romance book and I don't read a lot of romance, anything to do with a witch will just immediately intrigue me. I think this follows a woman who lives on an island, and she is some sort of witch, but I think she's cursed, so she can never experience love. But then this other woman comes to the island and sparks start flying. It sounds very sweet and a little bit magical. Next, we have Enlightenment by Sarah Perry, which caught my eye because I've read The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, which I know not everyone gets on with, but I really liked, so I'm excited to see her come out with something else. This one is historical fiction, and I think it follows two best friends who are obsessed with this astronomer. And that's all I really know, but I like that it sounds like a friendship is at the core of the story because I always love reading those kinds of stories. Then Stuart Turton, who I've read 2 books by and I really like, is coming out with a new book, and I'm so excited. It's called The Last Murder at the End of the World, and it's set on an island surrounded by fog. And apparently this fog has killed everyone else in the world. And on this island, we have 122 just regular people and 3 scientists. And I think what happens is that one of the scientists is murdered. And off we go. And I'm really excited about this because the concept sounds really interesting. But I also know that Stuart Turton will like take you for the ride of your life in some of his books. And I just think him writing this kind of story is going to be absolutely amazing. Like, it sounds so exciting. In June, we have a book coming out by another author that I'm obsessed with. It's The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, and I will read anything this author comes out with. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it doesn't even sound interesting to me. I will read it. And luckily, this does sound interesting to me. It's a mystery novel about this disappearance that sends shockwaves through 3 different communities. We have like an opulent summer estate, we have a rustic like camp of some sort, like a summer camp, and this blue collar community that I think sort of works with both. And that's all I really know. I don't feel like I need to know much more. If I didn't know this was coming out and I saw it in a bookshop, I would pick it up and not even look into it, because I just know that anything this author writes is good. Then we have got a July release that caught my eye, again a little bit because of the cover. It's Look in the Mirror by Catherine Steadman, and this is about this woman who, I think her father dies and she inherits this house that she didn't even know existed, and it's this dreamy vacation home in a tropical paradise. And of course that sounds amazing, but then there's something off with the house, and I think it said that it might end up costing her her life. How? I don't know, but it sounds like an interesting, mysterious summary type book. Second to last, we have a book coming out in August. It's The Volcano Daughters by Gina Maria Balibrera, and this says it's a searingly saucy debut, which is intriguing, and it follows two sisters, and I love stories about sisters, so honestly, that's kind of enough for me, but I did look into it a little bit more. These sisters are born, and I think they grow up in El Salvador under a dictatorship. But eventually they make their way out. It says they go to Paris and Hollywood, but they're always haunted by the ghosts of their past. I don't know what that means, but it sounds really good. Then we are going to end it with another witch book. It's A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping by Sangu Mandana. And I read another book by this author last year. A lot of people read that book last year, and I really enjoyed it. It had some really cozy vibes to it, and this seems to be a little bit in the same vein, and sometimes it's just nice to read these kinds of books that are a little bit lighter, a little magical. Again, I love books about witches. I'm assuming this is about a witch who runs an inn. I don't really know, but it sounds very cozy and very sweet. I also really like this cover. Like, I like the colors of it. Like, it just hits me. That was the last one though. We made it through my entire list of books. There are so many of them and we have so little time, but it's all exciting nonetheless. And I'd love to know if you're interested in reading any of these, or if there are any other releases coming out this year that you're really excited about. I would love to hear about it. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!